Okay, so we're going to meet with some of the people who have become members of Women for Kansas who were wanting to talk to us today or willing to talk to us today about some of the issues that they are most concerned with in the state of Kansas. And so going from left to right, we're going to start with Nicole, who's going to tell us a little bit about some of the issues that brought her into this group.
Well, first and foremost, the most lasting impression was starting out 2013, laid off as a result of the privatization of Medicaid, the CanCare. It was ushered in, and we were all led to believe it was going to be a wonderful thing, and that the MCOs would come in and just scoop us all up. But of course, like most instances that I found in the Brownback administration, what is said is not really reality. Just about all of us were laid off. Only maybe 2% were actually picked up and hired by the companies coming in. So, horrible way to start a new year, laid off. But also I have 2 young children that are still in school, and so all the different changes and things that's going on right now with our teachers and fundings, that's definitely impacting me as well as my children.
Well, Fran, you had mentioned education was a big concern for you.
It is. First of all, I am a lifelong Kansan, and I've always felt that I knew Kansans and I trusted them. Kansas was historically a very progressive state, and as I was growing up, it showed itself to be progressive. Well, now with the awful things we've seen in how Topeka treats our teachers, the cuts to the schools, added to the fact that I now have 2 great-grandchildren who will be in public schools before very long, and one of them is a special needs child, I'm really concerned about the quality of education we're going to provide for them, or that our government will think is necessary. Or are we going to go to all charter schools? This is not the Kansas that I've been so proud to be a part of for, well, it will soon be 80 years. And I think Kansans are better than this.
And I know you had said you had some specific issues that you had talked about, and
yeah, it really parallels with what Fran stated, that born and raised in Kansas, educated in Kansas, and seeing how the medical industry is now centered to become more commercial than a service-oriented industry. I, witnessed my having to come back and take care of parents because the state of Kansas was changing so much of what they were willing to do in the past for their Senior Care Act. And their loss caused me to have to come home, leave a great university position, take care of them, and as of this date, I have spent my entire retirement that I worked on for 30 years just to supplement the care for my parents. And I just don't believe that there is enough care. And when we look at the gender structure of our administrators, we're looking at more males, and we all know that compassion and the passion for the life of our children and our parents is going to naturally come from women. And so I'm interested in Women for Kansas simply because I believe that our passion and compassion for each other and our children will be able to turn things around. But the care of our seniors who have worked to create a different lifestyle for all of us is just not being considered or cared about at all.
Emira, I know you had said that you had issues of your own that you wanted to address here before we go to kind of a round format here.
Well, I think, the criminalization of immigrants has just become more and more, it has become worse as time goes by, and, having a Secretary of State that continuously targets not just immigrants, but any other minority, it's just our immigrant community are suffering, are being enslaved, they working and not being paid. And the list goes on, and everything that this woman has said, education, you know, for our kids, for the elderly, us immigrants, you know, have kids that are going to school, have parents that are being needed to take care of. And on top of that, we have to deal with the criminalization of just being an immigrant. And so there is no benefits for us, but now even more, there is no jobs up there that we can attain as immigrants and really be paid even minimum wage sometimes. And so, especially undocumented immigrants have no access to any type of you know, social services that they're used to exist for other people, and now they're almost non-existent since, you know, Kansas has become more and more conservative. But it's just, you know, all the laws they have passed that are criminalizing immigrants, and I'm talking about secure communities, E-Verify, Real ID Act, all those affects us at a federal level and at a state level. And it's really hard and sad to see that the person who is promoting those laws is as our Secretary of State. How can Kansas elect someone such as our Secretary of State?
You know, we brought up a lot of issues here, and I think a lot of them touch a huge number of Kansans. And so I'm going to try and go through them as best I remember, so we can kind of get some feedback from you. And one of the ones that I heard from two of you, so I'm going to take it up front, which is the issue of education. And you had mentioned you had a grandchild who has special needs. And I will admit I have a son who is a special needs child, and a brother who was a person who had a physical disability. One of the concerns that people do have with things like charter schools or vouchers or those is they aren't required to accept those who have disabilities or mental acuity issues or autism or any disability. And the question is where do you see Kansas education now that you feel should be changed, and what are the key steps electorally this fall? Is Brownback the biggest goal this fall? Is that really what has to change? You know, is that really what you're in this for? Is that how you see us changing this kind of policy in Kansas?
I can't point to just one part of the whole government. Brownback is the governor. So to me, yes, I would like to see him no longer have that title. Now, if we still have the same legislature, then we still have a long ways to go.
Yeah, one of the things that I continue to say since I've been with Women for Kansas is that we must make a promise and a commitment to go beyond this election, that whoever sits in the seat of legislation, if it were my dream, if everybody would be brand new. But I think what's important for us as a group is that we hold them to their commitments and their promises and their conversations. But that it's going to be very important for us to show up consistently, reminding them of what they said could happen, what were the possibilities for us in this new election. So I think what's for me that's even more important is that we stay committed to the areas that we're concerned with, and that we hold them, whoever is elected, we let them know right now through our convention and through our actions that we are not going to just vote and go home and sit down, that we will become an active force that will hold them to the commitments and have them to really understand what it is that we really care about. And, you know, it's like a forced action. We're never going away. We're baby kids. We don't die, we multiply.
For me personally, I agree with what both of you said. It's not just one person or one particular thing that's a problem. it's as a whole. But for me, I believe that they all work for us. So it's gonna be up to us as a people to say what we're gonna stand for and what we're not gonna stand for. And like you said, not just going down a list and checking a number or checking a name that we recognize, but taking the time to learn what each person that is running or on that ballot represents, and if we agree with that and what we don't. So we're voting consciously, not unconsciously, for me. And, you know, my daughter is, like I said, Brownback, I don't think removing him is going to be the end-all answer, but it's the catalyst for change. And it's showing other people that, you know what, this can happen, and if you are not more conscious of the votes and the things that you're doing and supporting, then you can lose your job too. Just like all of us when we don't perform, you know, that's a fear. But to me, it seems like that is not a realistic fear for them, for whatever reason.
Well, the next question I'm going to ask, I know three of you had brought up, and I'm sure most of you had a position on this. You had addressed can care. You had addressed issues with social services for your parents and others. And Emira, you had talked about social services and community supports for the immigrant community. One of the things that I think that leads us to is Kansas is one of those states that rejected the Medicare expansion and then privatized Medicaid and Social Security supplements through can care. And that's been a fairly controversial program here in this state. So you gave us a great example of how this directly impacted you, but how important is Kansas taking something like Medicaid expansion really in the community that you're with? Does that impact you or those around you?
Yeah. I mean, the gap is alive and real in my community. I represent everywhere I go the Council of Elders, the African American Council of Elders, who have found themselves to be very much a part of the image of our community in our care. And when they began to talk about the possibility of the gap, a lot of people said, what is that? And until we actually went into the process to get the insurance, so many people found themselves in the gap. They don't have insurance to this very day. Like myself, I got tired of living off of $172 a month, taking care of my parents. So I took early retirement. I took early retirement Social Security. Well, when I did that, guess what? I lost my medical assistance. I went until January without any medical help, and I got hurt. And there was nobody that was willing to care for me, no facility that was willing to give me medical care because I did not have insurance. And they were willing to, one particular facility was willing to take $10 every time I showed up. But I wasn't getting the x-rays and everything else that I needed. So for them to not accept that, it was like, it's unbelievable that people could care so less about other human beings in that act. It was inhumane. I felt very strongly about it.
And this is one of the concerns that a lot of people have about that program, that one of the things that we've heard said is that it's short-term savings at long-term costs, that by saving a little bit today, you end up spending significantly more potentially tomorrow. And I think that's one of the things that you had addressed. And I think that really applies to you within the immigrant community and you as someone who had worked in that we may be saving some today, but if a case slips through, in the end, we pay for it all the same. Let me move in a different direction. And that is the way that Women for Kansas is oriented around women getting out and talking to other women in their communities. How many of you, before you were involved in Women for Kansas, were politically active or had friends and family who were politically active?
Not really active, but more active than anybody in my friendship group.
Since I became a naturalized citizen, I take going to the polls and vote very seriously. because it's one of the things that a lot of people in the United States takes for granted. But in our countries, elections are sabotaged all the time, and one way or another. And for example, one little example is I have a sister who died when she was 45 days old, and every time I showed up to the polls, I wasn't on the list, but my sister who was dead was there. And those are the kinds of things that I experience in my country. So I have always tried to be involved somewhat. I always think that injustices need to be spoken of and need to be brought up to light. But I also know that there is a lot of lack of knowledge up there, and I think Women for Kansas is a place that we are seeking to inform others, and also to just encourage them to raise their voice and to understand that if we continue to be silent, it's only going to get worse. And Brownback is only the beginning on that sense. It's a step on the right direction, but just like they said, we have got to start somewhere and keep moving forward, because we need to clean house, period.
Yeah, I think that for me, in my early years as a student at Wichita State and living in the city, I was very active in the civil rights movement. But as I got older, I started losing hope in the entire political system in the United States. I didn't think it made, not one vote made any difference. I saw the decline, and I just kind of like, I'm going to do my job. But when I came back home, and I was truly affected, really affected by watching my parents unnecessarily suffer, and then getting back involved in my community and seeing what was happening. And it was like nobody really cared, or did they hear, or what is going on, forced me morally to get back involved and take this movement very serious. Because it's not just a political movement, it's a moral movement. We have got to change the moral consciousness of our people about how we treat and we handle and we love our own other human beings. It's ridiculous. And so that's why I'm back. Like I said, it's on.
Yeah, and just like with any problem, you leave it alone, it doesn't get better on its own.
Yeah.
And our young people are going to take their cue from us. Ever since I've been old enough to vote, I have, because at one point in time, my ancestors to certain ones didn't have that right. So I've always done it. Now, I can admit that there were certain times that, when I was younger, that it didn't mean as much to me as far as taking the time to really research every candidate and what they were supporting. But I have always made sure that I voted. But kind of like what you said, Wakeelah, now that it's more of a personal thing, I've grown up and I take that time to vote the right way, not just because that's what someone else is doing or that's where the majority's going. But like I said, when there's a problem, one voice alone, you're radical. But when you get lots of people together, that's when they will start to listen. So that is what brought me into Women of Kansas, what really piqued my interest. It can be discouraging when it seems like you're, the odd man out, but we're definitely not the odd man out. There's a lot of us. And I just think that, we will, again, like she said, educate and encourage other people to get together. And with that, I think we'll bring about change.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and close there, because I think that we kind of addressed really what brings people here, as well as some of the big issues. And I think there are some really compelling stories as to why we should care for 2014. I think getting back to one of our premises is that one of the things that has happened to Kansas, outside of the negatives, which people can easily focus on, is that one of the positives is that we've brought people back into being active within the community who have looked around, seen what's going on, and are willing to say, maybe I have to do something, maybe this is it. So I really want to applaud you for coming and sharing your stories, but also for making a difference within your communities, for going and talking to others about your message and why it's important to do something in 2014. In the end, one of the things that you said and something we had talked about earlier was that when we're silent on the issues, when we are afraid to talk to other people about it, and I know this is significant, especially for women and minorities and immigrants, we lose that voice. We lose the chance to share not just our opinion, but how we participate in the practice, to encourage others to become active. And I really want to praise all of you here for making the effort today to come out and speak to us. Okay?
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you.